Okay. Hi, everyone. It's 3 o'clock here, so let's get started. So as you can see on the doc, we have shared the slides, and we're going to jump directly to questions if we have them as they come up.
Yeah, thanks.
So Sean has the first question. Go, James.
Yep. So Sean's question is, are we starting design management without fixing batch commenting on images? Yes, we're already working on design management, but we will be scheduling that issue shortly. I'll review it and try and put a milestone on it shortly.
Does design management not involve batch commenting on images though? Like the mockups kind of look like it does, and it seems like it's weird to start the feature without fixing the existing feature that it's based on.
It's a good point. The early iteration, the first few iterations of design management are focused on the upload aspects of the images and getting them into a Git repository, and then making the versions available, making sure the images are being stored in LFS. So there's a few releases ahead before we actually get to the batch commenting. So I would, yes, definitely agree that we should make batch commenting on images work. Okay, but I guess batch commenting is kind of separate to the point of interest commenting, because point of interest commenting does work currently, and the commenting proposed for design management is going to be one by one, not a batch review kind of point of interest commenting. But
okay,
we should
I didn't realize
resolve
it was. Yeah, no, I didn't realize it was one by one for the design management stuff. Thanks.
Sid's got the next comment on.
Shall I verbalize it? So
yes, that would be great.
In Fabricator, for example, you can leave a comment about multiple lines. So you can kind of select, hey, it's about this paragraph, and instead of having to select a specific line. And sometimes that's like, I want to give a comment about the paragraph, not about a specific line. Not sure if people find that useful or if it's on the radar of people.
It's come up now and then. We looked at it quite closely when we were thinking about suggesting changes, because one of the use cases we think would be really great, and we're working on currently for suggesting changes, is to suggest changes to a whole paragraph or a whole function. And we actually decoupled this improvement, or this by we decoupled the two things so that you could suggest changes to multiple lines without actually selecting and commenting on multiple lines, because as we started investigating it from the UX perspective, there's quite a lot of challenges. And so one of the I guess, things that I don't think Fabricator does very well is comments aren't displayed by default. You have to actually expand them one by one when they're overlapping ranges. And this is a similar problem that all the other review tools have when they have overlapping ranges, is knowing which ones to show. And so they all default to not really showing any, or the ones you probably want to see. So that's a really big downside of commenting on ranges where they'll overlap. And the other, I guess, downside is leaving a comment is really simple, because you just click on at least one, on a line. You still have to decide which line you leave the comment on, but you don't have to decide, like, is this a one-line comment or is it a multi-line comment? You're just like, where do I put it? And I think there's a UX load that comes in deciding, like, will this be a single line comment or will this be a multi-line comment? What's the right way of doing it? That we need to factor in. So it's something we're aware of, listening to feedback about, but I'm not necessarily convinced that it's something we want to do in the short term, and it's the most important code review improvement that we could be making.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the question. Josh, you've and Sean, you're leaving some comments, sort of following on. Do you want to verbalize any questions or comments?
Yeah, sure. So just during the review of the release post last month, I thought the suggestion was great, but one challenge is that we frequently use line breaks to make it more readable. And so the problem is oftentimes, like, a paragraph or sentence could break between lines, and that becomes hard to do like a multi-line suggestion. So I guess it looks like we're doing multi-line suggestions, which is great. But I'm curious how multi-line suggestions is different than multi-line comments. I guess is the follow-on question. That might be interesting.
Yeah, so I guess you can leave a comment on a line, but your suggested change could impact multiple lines. I guess, yeah, I guess that's kind of the point I was making early on, is like they were initially seemed very tightly related, and I think there is a strong relationship between the two. And if you were to try and come up with the most natural way to suggest changes to multiple lines, you would have a multi-line comment. Like, it would be very nice if there was a one-to-one relationship, but we avoided or decided against having that one-to-one relationship, at least in the short term, because of the other challenges it created, and it made the scope of the feature much, much larger, and would have created a bunch of UX problems that we weren't sure we wanted to solve just to get the suggesting a multi-line change. So we'll see how it pans out once we ship the multi-line suggestions, and maybe we need to iterate on it, and we do need to solve the problem. But yeah.
And looking at the issue, my main concern would be like, how discoverable is the multi-line syntax?
Yeah. And there's a discoverability issue currently that we're aware of with suggesting changes. The button's not very obvious. We've got a proposal to increase that, and hopefully increase the usage of that feature. And I think, yeah, we'll need to address that also for the multi-line suggestions. But I think you can sort of tackle them as separate things. Like, yes, dragging and selecting multiple lines is one way of doing it, but perhaps if the button to like suggest a change opens some other selector or some other way of previewing it, or you've got a diff preview and you can say like add 2 more lines above or below. Like, there's multiple ways to skin that cat that don't necessarily require the multi-line comment. But thanks for the feedback. Victor, you were mentioning subline word commenting.
When you have jumping quickly, James.
Sorry, I missed your comment.
Yeah, so one thing, I can't actually find an issue for this, but one thing I've always found weird and obviously never created an issue for that's missing is that you can make GitLab highlight multiple lines in a blob view by changing the URL and refreshing the page. And there's an issue there about how you have to refresh the page, but you can't do it by shift clicking on the lines, which is pretty weird. I found a commit from 5 years ago where apparently we had this. So I don't know what happened, but if anybody can find an issue, please put it in the doc. Otherwise, I'll create one after the call.
James, my point.
Go for it, Victor.
Yeah, so my point is, when a lot of us at GitLab use GitLab source control beyond source control. We use it for content. And so most people that I've seen, for example, when they do changes in Handbook, they don't break their lines and paragraphs. And I don't think they should be, because that's not how you write in any other text editor outside of GitLab. So, but I purposely break the lines because I want it to look nice. And also it's easier to comment. So have you had any thoughts on solving that problem? I don't think necessarily commenting part of a line necessarily makes sense, but perhaps there's another way with that line breaking that makes more sense to solve that problem.
I think one of the first things we can address is word level diff highlighting. So we currently just highlighted the whole line and say, here's the line you had before, and here's the new line, which doesn't indicate what actually changed. And so
it does, but you see, there's like 2 levels. There's like green and then dark green or something like that, right? And
well, I don't even think there is on suggestions. Maybe
I was
suggestions.
just talking about diffs and stuff.
Oh, okay, so just diffs generally. So commenting,
but like for diffs and commenting, like somebody will type a really long sentence or just a really long paragraph, but it's one sentence because they never hit enter. And then so that just shows up as one block inside a diff. And then when you comment on that, it's that whole thing together. And so I don't know if the solution is helping people to break up their sentences more or changing the editor some way, but maybe this is not a high priority because it's not exactly source control, but it's something that I find a lot of people at GitLab, when they're editing content, just like English words on a page, that's something.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about that use case. Yeah, I mean, I prefer to format my Markdown blocks with like 80 character line limits, because that works really well. But then I understand that a lot of people don't like doing that, particularly for prose. Because then as soon as you change one word, it rewraps and you have to like redo all the line breaks.
Would it make sense for GitLab when it commits that it chops up your super long line for you automatically? Like, would that be a possibility?
I mean, it's possible in the web IDE perhaps, but then there's plenty of people I think that are committing to the release post directly from their local editors with like 700 character long lines.
Right.
Yeah, I think providing tools and better feedback around line length might be one way, but I think there's still an underlying problem that people write prose, and there's a school of thought around writing prose in text files that you don't force a line limit and you let the view wrap. And so commenting on that situation doesn't work well. So I'll create an issue, and if I can't find one, so that we can track this. Okay. But I'm not sure what the solution is.
Right. No. Yeah. I was curious if you even. It seems like a hard problem. So thank you for discussing it. I won't take anybody else's time.
Sid, I think you've got the next point. Would you like to verbalize it?
Yeah, thanks. I think it got answered to the G issue in the Epic. We're looking into kind of showing code coverage inline, but we're not there yet. And there's some things that are marked accepting merge requests. I know of some there's organizations switching from Fabricator who really love to see this, but I think it's all handled in the issue. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Mech, for your comment about the slides. Dad was on it.
Thank you. Just terminology is important. And every time somebody says QA engineer, I cringe every time, because that's not how we do quality here at GitLab. Quality is everybody's responsibility. So it's known already, just pointing that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Mech. That's an important distinction. We'll fix it. Brendan, you have the next question. Do you want to verbalize it?
Yeah, it'd be great. This is a great conversation, by the way. As I shared in the gcreate channel, and I'll share a snippet here in the doc too for anybody that wants to do it. I used TamperMonkey to disable the old school edit button in GitLab to force myself to use the Web IDE. So I'm thinking about the Web IDE a lot. And I'm just wondering, I know you've probably considered this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, James, on how all this great stuff that we're bringing into diffs and code review is or is not going to interact with the Web IDE in the long term.
Yeah, wow, you've hit on one of the great debates that's raged about the Web IDE and its purpose. When we were thinking about building the file tree into merge requests, that request actually came through as implement commenting and essentially all the merge request features into the Web IDE. So it was all proposed in the other direction to essentially replace merge requests with the Web IDE and do it all in the Web IDE. So we had to think about that quite carefully. And I think one of the reasons why we haven't done that is that there are some things that merge requests do that are really different to the Web IDE in terms of the discussions that are not associated with the diff, seeing versions and history. There's a lot of information that is shared, like we show CI information, things like that. But there's a lot of sort of workflows and purposes and intention in the merge request interface that's quite different around leaving comments on it. There's ongoing interest in people who are like, oh, I'd like to be able to suggest comments from the merge request, particularly if I'm reviewing a really complicated change and I want to suggest a series of changes without like that need to sort of be merged together. So let's say someone's like needs a function refactored, but doesn't really know how to do it and needs a few other things changed, and it's going to touch like lots of lines or 20% of the lines in the merge request. You can't really suggest a change as a code comment because it's going to be impossible to review and understand what's being proposed, and maybe it's actually composed of 4 suggestions across 4 different files, and what they might accept one of them but not the other ones, so the whole thing doesn't work. But when you get into that scenario, it sounds a lot more like a merge request being proposed onto a merge request, which you can already do, but the workflow is not very seamless. And so there's an idea that was discussed in, I think, last month's Create team call when we were talking about planning and other things, where we were suggesting, well, what if there was a really streamlined way to actually open a merge request onto a merge request that looked more like a suggestion and could be like merged in with a single click. So that's one idea of like a workflow that might accommodate some of that. It's not really addressing the commenting situation that you brought up, like wanting to leave comments in the web IDE. There's definitely an issue open for that, tracking interest in that. But I'm pretty hesitant to duplicate everything from the merge request interface into the web IDE, because if we start leaving comments, then people want to start viewing comments as well, and it says existing threads, and then all of a sudden we've duplicated the diff view into the web IDE, and I don't know that we want to do that. But it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And yeah, it's not. I just wanted to find a harder problem to solve than what Victor came up with. Okay, that's what I was going for. But yeah, no, that's why I wasn't necessarily suggesting it. I was interested in how the team's thinking about it. So that's really helpful. Thanks, James.
No worries. Josh, would you like to verbalize your question?
Yeah, I think it's been largely answered. Basically, I enjoy using the web IDE, and one challenge I've had is I've never been able to find out how to get back to the MR from like when I hit the button to open in web IDE, how to get back over. And so that was my question. And Olivia, thank you for posting the link. If that wasn't new in Lum.9, then I apparently have missed it for a long time. But that's great. Really happy to see it there. My only other thought was that I've also went to look for it in like the right sidebar like thing where you can get the live preview, like the pipeline and the MR page, and you get the whole MR, but you can't get back to it from there. But,
yeah, we should have a link. We should have more links, not just one link.
Yes, so super excited about the link. At least knowing it's there. I'm not sure what was there, but super happy it's there. So thank you.
One thing to note is that the link would be there if you clicked on the merge request, like open the merge request in the web IDE. But if you opened the branch directly or you made a commit and you end up on the branch, it wouldn't, even if there was a merge request open against that branch, it wouldn't show you the link back to the merge request. So there were situations where you would see it and some situations where you wouldn't. And so what we're working on in 11.9, or what we've done in 11.9 is make it that there's always that link visible back to the merge request. And I think that should make a big difference in unexpected and unpredictably making that link available.
Awesome, thanks.
Sid, would you like to verbalize your thoughts?
Yeah, if we leave something off by default for self-managed instances, should we even make it part of the release post? Because now we have a release post that says, well, we shipped this, by the way, by default it doesn't work for you. By the way, we also turned it off on GitLab.com, which makes us look pretty silly. Now, I'm all for iteration. I can handle looking silly. But I think also we should kind of have a backstop. Like we shouldn't claim anything unless we like got it all the way there. And otherwise, also you lose maybe a bit momentum. You and I talked a bit about the client-side evaluation and how that's only usable by like 1% of the population. We announce it, we're done. Like there's no pressure anymore. But then nobody can really use it. So maybe we should say, hey, look, something is done when it's on by default. And the worst thing is we don't announce it. Some people find the new feature, but it's not in the release post. I think we never had many complaints about it. I'm worried about it, but I want to kind of try the other thing, because I see the disadvantage of this, and I'm not sure many people would complain if we ship something, but we haven't put it in the release post yet, or shipped something like it's enabled for some portion of GitLab.com.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of hand-wringing about whether to include it and how to include it in the release post. I'm not sure if Mark or Mark Punsak or John Jeremiah are on the call. We spoke about it at quite a bit of length before the release post, because we knew it was going to be defaulted off because of uncertainty around not having had quite as much time as we wanted to test it, and that planned out. Like, as soon as we turned it on, within a couple of hours, we saw there were issues and turned it back off for another couple of days until we could fix it in the next patch release. I think the outcome of that meeting was that we did include it, but I think I definitely see the other perspective, which is announcing based on what is in the packaged release available to everyone. I guess one of the items, the sort of like key thing that went backwards and forwards between everyone is, what is the purpose of the release post? Is it announcing what's available on GitLab.com? Is it announcing what's in the omnibus release? It sort of does both at the moment. And so I think maybe clearly stating that one way or the other, or having some guidelines about this would help, so there wouldn't be a last minute discussion about whether we should include something or not.
Yeah, and right now we're announcing something that's available on neither. So if you're not sure enough to turn it on by default, maybe that's a signal.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I was looking back at our product notes to see what we actually came to conclusion on there, and the to-do, which from James was basically summarized with, we have no problem announcing multiple times. So that one of the things was announce early that it's in beta if there's a way for them to turn it on, and then announce when it's generally available. And so as long as we actually do make 2 announcements about it, and it's truly sort of like an early access beta that like, hey, here's how you turn it on, here's how you do this. But I think we also had lots of discussion about how feature flags are actually really painful to turn on, and it's not the same thing as saying it's a beta. It's not like there's a little switch inside your UI, you just turn it on. So I personally think like that's kind of below the threshold of counting it as a beta.
Cool. Are we gonna memorialize that?
Yeah, absolutely. That needs to get documented. I think James.
Yeah, that's still on my to-do list, which I will sort that out.
Thanks, and no biggies. I had another question, but it was answered. We have a feature request for it. Can't wait for that thing to ship, where if I press git blame, I can see like when it was changed, but I want to see the previous change of that line or the previous change of that line. And now that's super convoluted. So love to see an easier way to do that.
Hi, I have a question about the review process, because currently we spend a lot of time assigning and reassigning the merge request to the author or the reviewer, and having multiple assignees is really great, because at the same time we could assign it to a backend reviewer, front-end reviewer, multiple people that have to review that merge request. But we currently still need to unassign and reassign people. I think it would be way better to have this assign list table, because it helps to know who is reviewing what, but we then need a status to tell people I'm done with my work on that merge request right now, and it's up to you to keep processing it. And I think it will help to remove the friction that we have today on the review process and make it faster. Do you have any coming work on this? You're muted, James.
I was looking at Dower and asking if he wanted to tackle this first. Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Multiple assignees sort of helps, but it doesn't really solve the authors needing to unassign and reassign. I am I don't think I've seen this issue. I see that you've pinged me, but I haven't had a chance to review it. I'm interested in Dawa on your thoughts because you probably experience this more on a daily basis yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not saying much because I'm thinking about it, and I think this is also one where I probably need to think about it more before I have something really concrete to say. I'm kind of hurt by the fact that I've been around the GitLab so long, and a lot of the things, for just how we do it, have become so ingrained, and I'm so used to them now that I have a different perspective on them than people coming in new and seeing all these things, because we have kind of found ways around them in our, the years that we've been here already. We should be able to come up with something better than just reassigning, ping-ponging back and forth between the author and the merge request author, especially if you need review from multiple people, in which case multiple assignees will help, but then you're still going to have some kind of ping-pong there. I do like the aspect of an assignee as the ball is in this person's court now. If so that it's really clear for a reviewer, when am I supposed to look at it? Well, only if it's reviewed to me, and after that I can forget about it until, if it's assigned to me, and after that I can forget about it until it's assigned to me again. But then there's also something to be said for these reviewers to be stable, because the person you're going to be ping-ponging with back and forth is probably going to be the same one for a while, so it's useful for the reviewer to be in the interface somewhere as a stable, I guess, counterpart to that merge request. Olivier, maybe if you have more thoughts about this, you can vocalize those or verbalize those.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise this potential issue. I can see it as a replacement, because we're replacing assignees because it's now doing that job. But we can totally think about a new UX improvement or a new iteration where we'll have a token passed around each of the assignees so that they're stable, but we do get to see whose court the ball is on at each moment. I think this is very valuable feedback for us to pass to UX, to definitely see if we can do it as part of the first iteration, just have it a follow-up issue. But it's definitely very important that we should address it. So thank you very much for that feedback. I don't have any other further comments.
Olivier, I'm curious though how that issue that you linked to specifically relates to the problem of having a stable reviewer. Although I'm guessing you would say that the reviewer would stay assigned and you ping pong having it needs work versus review being addressed, and then needs work and ready for another review, needs work, ready for review. So would you have multiple statuses there? Although of course there's this intermediary state where it's ready for review but also not ready to be merged yet. But then you'd kind of have another third flag on top of work in progress, which we have today. I definitely sympathize with the issue, but I think this deserves some more discussion on some of these issues. So if you have more thoughts there, I'd love to read them.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of the I think the final slide in the presentation was sort of some of the things we're thinking about, which is re-reviewing. And so like after I leave a review, coming back and seeing what has changed, what has been addressed and what hasn't been addressed. And so I think that kind of relates to it as well, because like if there is work needed, being able to see that there is work needed, if I could see that 5 of the 10 comments that I left have been resolved, but the other